Hello and welcome. This is Candice here from Hey Sweet Art, and today we are going to paint an easy Table Mountain sunset painting. I'll leave a link below with the template to the silhouette of the Table Mountain. In terms of sizing, you might decide to scale it up or maybe make it a bit smaller. I've made it smaller here to fit into my pocket watercolor handbook, but you can see a slightly bigger version above that I've painted before. And all you are going to do is plot that onto your page. You can decide if you would like it sort of 3/4 of the way up or halfway up, so that the top portion will be your sky and the bottom portion is going to be your water. I've templated mine onto the page, and I'm now just going in with a clean wash of water on the top section of the image. So I've sort of positioned mine about halfway, and I'm just laying in that water until I get to the horizon line of the Table Mountain. And then I'm going to pick up some color and drop that into the painting. What you are wanting in this wet layer of water is a nice sheen of water, not a big puddle or pool. And that's just going to help when you lay in your pigment, that it disperses the watercolor really nicely on your paper. I'm keeping my sunset quite gentle with wash layers of color, and I might add in some stronger pigment of a more pinkish color coming through, just to create a little bit of interest. And you'll see now when I pick up a bit of that pigment with some tissue paper to leave the texture of clouds behind, it just adds a bit of 3-dimension and depth to the sky. It's fine to paint over your silhouette because we are going to paint that in quite dark. So if you do paint over it, actually I recommend it, just so that there's some continuity in the sky and no definite breaks. I'm going to tear off a bit of paper towel, and I'm going to use this to leave the impression of clouds on the paper. So you'll see that I just roll it up into a little ball, and I'm literally just dabbing onto the page, picking up some pigment and leaving the impression of clouds on the painting. For some extra interest, I'll pick up a bit of a darker pink, and I'm just going to drop that into the bottom of the clouds to give a little bit of 3-dimension and shadow in that texture. So I'm happy with the sky. I'm now going to go in and wet the bottom of my page, which is going to be the water. And then I'm going to basically apply the same method, but with the colors that I'd like in the water. What I like to do on this sort of horizon line is just pull a thin band of orange across, which is going to soften quite nicely in that layer of water. And this is just to give the impression of lights on the coastline at night. For this next portion, we're going to move on to the mountain. I am going to dry this with a hairdryer, and then I'm going to come in and plot in my silhouette of the mountain, which you can see I've done here. I've accidentally not filmed that portion, but all I've done is laid in the silhouette of the mountain, and then I've taken a damp brush and just run it along the bottom edge of that mountain to keep that horizon line soft. So where the land meets the sea, it's nice and soft. That sort of goes into the mountain a little bit because we're going to drop in some lights. I'll then dry that again with a hairdryer just to speed up the process. And then the second step now with the mountain is plotting in the shadows with a slightly darker pigment. My water layer has dried quite nicely, and now I'm going to add in some of the wave details. How I'm going to do this is quite impressionistic in a sense. I'm just going by sight of a reference image where the waves closest to us are slightly larger, and then as it gets closer to the horizon line, they sort of disappear into thin straight lines. So we're going to keep it free and loose and just giving impressions of waves. I'm going to plot all of this detail in now, and then I'm going to use a damp brush while that layer is drying, and I'll just wash over it a little bit just to soften those lines, to give that sort of hazy sunset effect. Here's where I'm going in with my damp brush now, just softening the edges of those lines and giving that impression of a hazy sunrise, sunset effect. I've picked up a bit more of my orange pigment and I'm just dropping that in towards the horizon line. This is just going to give the impression of the city lights glowing at sunset. I've picked up a little bit of the pink and I'm going to drop that into the water as well, just reflecting some of the pink from the sky in the water. I've taken a hairdryer just to dry this off again, just for the final step, which is picking up pigment and just mark making along the horizon line, giving the impression of city lights. I've used a bit of orange and yellow for the city lights, but what is also nice is if you take a bit of white gouache and you dot that in places as well. To finish off with a damp brush, I'm just pulling in some highlights back into the mountain range. So all I'm doing is using a damp brush, I'm re-wetting the areas where I want to restore some highlights, and I'm using my brush just to lift that pigment off. If you do happen to paint this, I'd love to see your version, so please be sure to tag me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is @heysweet.art.